Huge new changes announced at Foxtel this week. They are now introducing Foxtel Now, which he won't say it out loud, Peter Tonner, who is the CEO of Foxtel, but I think is their attempt at being a Netflix killer. Will he take the bait? Let's find out. Peter, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mark.
So I want to talk about the changes in Foxtel and the changes in TV in general, but let's start with this. In your time as a media executive, you've worked across News Corp and Foxtel. What's the biggest change in media consumption that you've seen?
I think it's changing all the time, but the single biggest change, I think, is the shift to mobile. And we've seen this dramatic shift, which happened a lot faster, I think, than people expected, where everyone went from single device, big screen television to multiple devices with a little bit of mobile to a massive amount of consumption of all forms of media. The same is true in News Corp, the same is true in television. People are just using small screens.
What is Foxtel Now? Is this your Netflix killer?
So I think you've got to, first of all, consider that effectively we have two services. We have Foxtel and we have Foxtel Now. Foxtel is the premium service, people with the IQ device. It's broadcast quality, cable or satellite, the best way to consume high quality, reliable, non-disrupted television. On the other hand, there's Foxtel Now, and Foxtel Now is essentially an IP streaming product. It's a streaming product that's primarily an on-demand product that customers will consume the content on demand, but it has the benefit of also being able to access live channels, live sport, live news.
You can look at any media organisation in the last couple of years and it's become really clear that original series, original content is brand defining. And I've always sort of wondered in the back of my head if the danger of a deal with, and obviously it's a locked up deal with HBO, I get that, but is there an inherent danger that you are relying on somebody else to deliver you a product that you will define your brand by in the case of Game of Thrones? And what becomes of your brand without that?
The first point I'd make is that we have a very long-term deal with HBO, and there's no.
I'll bet you've signed that one up good and long proper.
And of course, we did that for a reason, for very good commercial reasons.
Yeah.
And it's a long-term deal that has long-term exclusivity. The reason we did a long-term deal is exactly the reason that you say. We don't want to tie our own brand to someone else's brand unless we know that we're partners and that we're investing closely with them.
Yeah,
we're very, very close to HBO. We spend a lot of time with them, and so they are if you have to tie yourself to any brand, I think in drama, HBO is a great brand to tie yourself to. At the same time, we don't want to be totally reliant on HBO, and hence our own local productions are very, very important to us, and we'll continue to create the fantastic Logie Award-winning dramas that we've been producing in the past.
How much control do you exert over Sky News Australia? Because it's wholly owned by News Corp, but it's one of the sort of flagship offerings of the Foxtel suite of things you get. And I'm just curious how does your relationship work there?
So we exert no editorial control or editorial influence over Sky News. And that's an important component of the nature of the relationship between a platform like Foxtel and the news services that operate on the Foxtel platform. I can tell you our customers think that we should exert more control.
Oh, really?
How so? I've had a lot of letters from customers who say that Mark Latham should have been removed. I have got a lot of letters from customers who say Mark Latham should not have been removed as a presenter on Sky News.
You can't just pick up the call to Angelo.
The reality is that that's very intentionally not part of our role. We want to provide an agnostic platform. News Corp owns Sky News. News Corp can basically decide on the positioning of Sky News. They can decide on, where it wants to sit in that spectrum. Once they do that, like any good news organisation, I'm sure they operate with a huge amount of editorial independence.
The reason I ask is because Greg Hywood got up the other day, Greg Hywood being the man in charge of Fairfax, and he had an interesting thing that he said in Senate estimates, that he thought that the ABC moving into digital publishing was basically hobbling commercial providers. And it struck me that the group that was most probably affected by that in recent memory was Sky News, being the only news channel, 24-hour news channel, being affected by the introduction of what was then ABC News 24. I'm wondering, do you have a view on that? Do you think the ABC has overstepped its mark?
I won't comment on the ABC.
We will let you out. It's fine. You're not trapped here. It's okay.
I'm in the ABC premises. I will be trapped here.
No, I mean, it's a valid criticism. He's certainly not the first person to make it, and I'm curious where, as a major media executive in Australia, you stand on it.
Yeah, I'd start with a couple of views. First of all, I think it's very important for Australia that we have a diversity of voice. Mm-hmm. I also think it's very important for Australia that in that diversity of voice, we have Australian voices. to me, a lot of the media reform changes that are being proposed, including the 2 out of 3 change, are very important to sustain that. And what I mean by that is that those antiquated rules were put in place at a time where there was no internet. And at that time, it was very important to drive diversity of voice by ensuring that there were enough media players to provide different views. We're now in a position where we've got many, many views that are available in Australia. There's many global news sites. There's Google, there's Facebook, there's a number of social media platforms that are able to actually come into this country and provide an alternative range of sources. If local media is going to be able to compete with the major global players, it can't compete on global scale. It has to be able to compete on the scope of how it delivers. If it's going to compete on the scope to deliver, then you need the ability for Australian media companies to be able to work across platforms, because that's how Australians consume their media. And so therefore, I would argue strongly that the media reforms have to change. We will have diversity of voice. We know we'll have diversity of voice because we have all of the global players. We also have an ACCC to ensure that we protect diversity of voice. But unless we remove the impediments to Australian organisations being able to operate across platforms, my fear is we'll lose the Australian voice. Now, the ABC is obviously one of those Australian voices, and so, yes, it will continue to exist, I'm sure.
But there depends what Pauline Hanson has to say about it, I suppose.
there need to be alternative Australian voices as well.
Yeah, all right. There is a full episode discussion with Peter about changes in the media industry, changes in piracy, and much more you can find on the Download This Show podcast. It is available. I don't know why I'm checking my watch. Now, there you go.